better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow. A better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow. A better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow. A better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow. A better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Janice Bauto from the Cybersecurity Product Team of Globe Business, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. It's 9 a.m. and we already have over 200 people in the call, and many others are still trying to come in. So again, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I'm absolutely very pleased and honored to welcome you all to this session of our cybersecurity web series that we are hosting together with our partner SecureWorks. Today, we will talk about the importance of a strong security maturity, a topic that is very relevant to any company regardless of industry, business model, or even size. But before we begin, we'd like to get to know you a little bit, specifically the security maturity level of your organization. So on your screen, you will see a poll. It will come up in a few seconds. Okay, so you see a poll there and you have three choices. All you have to do is click your answer, but don't worry, this is totally anonymous and we will not see your names when you answer this. We just want to get a feel of where your companies are in terms of cybersecurity. For Globe people, please refrain from answering. So let's leave it to our clients. By the way, I'm sorry about the background noise. Please bear with me. Oh, we will give you maybe 10, 15 seconds to answer this. Okay. Maybe let's go for 150 people. Okay. Come on, guys. Okay, we have reached 50%. So yeah, maybe we can see the result. All right. Well, as you can see here, most of you, majority of you said that your company is proactive. It's interesting to see that most of you answered this because according to a study, most organizations in the country are still tools-based and have a compliance mindset when it comes to cybersecurity. So we will talk more about this later. Maybe that will be validated. Maybe that will be challenged. We will see. But thank you to everyone who answered. And at this point, I would like to... Okay, can we close this poll? I would like to call on our first speaker. He is the Senior Vice President for the Enterprise Group at Globe Telecom. Prior to joining Globe, he was Deputy CEO of Livet Investments, an Ayala Corporation company, and CEO of SPI Technologies. He completed his studies in the US with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Southern California. Friends, let us all welcome Mr. Peter Maquera to officially open today's session.
Janice, am I on? There we go. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Janice. I think your dog had some thoughts on cybersecurity as well that he or she wanted to share. But don't worry, I think everything's game. Everything's game in these new webinar days. So good morning again, everyone. So these are certainly unprecedented times. We're now 6 months into the pandemic. I think after the first 2 months, a lot of companies were thinking, hey, we'll just buckle down and we'll ride through this, right? But I'd say starting about 4 months ago, our customers started, the stronger ones, were saying, you know what? maybe this is the new reality, right? There's going to be more black swans. They're going to be more intense, and I just have to get on with my business. So we see actually companies now dusting themselves off and just adjusting to this new normal of sorts. So what we saw was clearly those who are more digital were less affected and are poised to recover sooner. We see that the pandemic is actually accelerating companies' plans for digital transformation. But let's step back for a minute. What does that mean? What does it mean to be digital? Let's define it in terms of the characteristics of being a digital company. It's being pervasive, it's being ubiquitous, it's being personalized, it's always on, it's mobile. Do you realize though that to have all these characteristics, to be digital, you actually expose yourself to many more cyber threats? Among the enterprise customer base, hundreds of thousands of employees are now working from home. How do you protect all these endpoints? How do you track where they're using it and what their environment, what working environment they're in? How do you protect your assets, your apps that are now that are accessible directly on the internet? So the recent studies that I've read, the Philippine attacks are actually 2 times more in Q3 than they were in Q1 before the pandemic. A leading web security firm, they estimate that the attacks on the website are 300 times more. The increases are in phishing, fake websites, viruses, ransomware. Ransomware amounts, interestingly, are actually getting smaller, but they're becoming more frequent. Sounds actually like a viable business, quick inventory turnover. So you can see how during a pandemic, there's a lot of these opportunists that come out of the marketplace, and so you have to be much more aware of what's going on. So hopefully this morning can help give you a framework to evaluate your cybersecurity posture. We have a great lineup of experts for you. Our main speaker, John Bird, he's a senior consultant with SecureWorks. SecureWorks is our main partner in managed security services here in the Philippines. They are rated #1 in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. SecureWorks has over 4,100 customers across 50 countries. They're processing over 310 billion security incidents each day. I was doing the math. I was thinking there's what, about 8 billion people on the planet. So on average, we're having incidents of 40 times per person each day. So you think about that, right? So one, maybe you don't even know that you're being exposed, but perhaps the more scary reality is there's all kinds of bot hackers, on the planet today. So you just can't be too careful. Joining John later on in a panel discussion is Garrett Silao and Kokoy Claraval. Garrett is Globe's director of cybersecurity operations. They've got 100+ guys protecting over 100 million consumers that are Globe's customers and a couple 100,000 businesses. It's his team that allows us to sleep at night. The executives, see their reports once a week. I'm impressed that a lot of their SLAs are top decile in the world. A lot of the really important ones are actually top 1% even. Along with Garrett is Kokoy Claraval. He's our vice president of new product development and engineering, but he's also the head of our cybersecurity practice. So going to market. So he's the one talking to our customers, and he can share some valuable insights in terms of what's happening in the local Philippine business environment. So among other things, I hope you guys walk away realizing that cybersecurity is not just about compliance. It's day-to-day warfare. You have to embed it in your culture, and you have to make it part of your DNA. With that, I hope you guys gain some valuable insights. If you have some follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have the most amazing account managers in the industry. Stay safe, everyone, and have a great day. Over to you, Janice.
Thank you, Peter, for the nice message, and happy to have you with us today. For the main presentation, as Peter mentioned, we have Mr. John Bird. He is the Senior Consultant of Information Security Research at SecureWorks Counter Threat Unit. He has extensive experience as a vulnerability and risk management advisor responsible for helping customers identify and tackle their biggest security challenges. Before I turn the floor over to John, if you have any questions during his presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box below, and we will have them answered during the panel discussion later. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Janice. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Yep, great. Yep. Okay. So, yep, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this. I believe it's our first Globe and SecureWorks cyber seminar. My name is John Bird, as introduced. I work in what's called the Hard Targets division of the SecureWorks CTU, or the Counter Threat Unit, and I'm specializing in cloud-based attack and defense methods and techniques. And one thing to note, Janice, is that in our team, when we hear a dog barking, you, by law, are required to show us the dog. So later on, I do expect to see pictures. So today, we're going to be looking at some of the trends in security threats, including, as Peter mentioned, some on ransomware attacks. And we're going to be taking some of the many insights that our incident response teams have uncovered from recent engagements, and turning that into something that's sort of tangible, actionable, and available for everyone here on this call, and applicable to whether you're just starting on this journey or whether you're already some way down that road. But first, I want to start off with the reason we are here. Like Peter was saying, the world has undergone a digital revolution. Many people now have affordable access to computers, to smartphones and telecommunications, and wonderful things like the cloud. And this transformation has provided so many things now that we simply take for granted. Even an online webinar like this Zoom call, for example, would not have been possible, or would have been prohibitively expensive 20 years ago, for example. And it is difficult to see, for me anyway, how we would have managed without these things, especially this year in the light of COVID. I've got, we've been in lockdown here in Melbourne since almost the start of the year. I've got 2 young kids who, they telecommute to school, or, all their classes are online. Their schoolwork is in an online platform. And all these things are brilliant, but they also introduce risk. And that's really why we're here. So these technologies come with a risk and a risk profile that needs to be quantified, understood, assessed against competing business needs, maybe, and then prioritized. And that's really quite hard to do well. And the risk of not doing that is significant as well. So this year, we've seen businesses and organizations that have gone out of business because they failed to manage these risks and were hit by a ransomware attack, for example, that they never were able to recover from. So these risks require action, and we need to protect our businesses and protect our organizations. And what I want to show you is some of the numbers here. So, these are in US dollars, and they're huge numbers, and they reflect just part of the very real risks involved. And in fact, these numbers may in fact be underestimated. The truth is, like in a headline figure, for example, that the attacker was paid $10 million, that's all that goes into the headline. What doesn't make it into the headline is how much that company had to pay to roll out the decryption keys across their organization and get back into shape, and then figure out how the attackers got onto their systems in the first place, which requires a significant investment in resources. It doesn't include things like the regulatory fines and the class action lawsuits that might follow an attack, like we saw at Equifax, for example. And it doesn't include the more ephemeral or nebulous things like the loss of customer trust. How do you quantify that? Or the loss of brand damage. And the other thing to take away is that these numbers aren't slowing down, that this 27% is year on year. And but by those numbers, we're going to end up at $12 trillion by probably around the 2026 mark. So the audience here today represents the top businesses in and around Southeast Asia, and almost everyone here will be security leaders within those organizations. And so as leaders, how do you respond to those numbers? You're almost certainly aware, otherwise you probably wouldn't be at this webinar, that there are risks inherent to digital technologies, but how do you effectively manage that? So SecureWorks and Globe have decades of experience in this space. And what we found is that these are the 4 most commonly asked questions that security leaders want to and are looking to be able to answer effectively. So starting off with one, where do I start on my organization's journey? Someone is always starting from scratch, and it's difficult to know right at the start how to start, like where do you even begin? And then maybe you do already have a plan in place, but are the plans and other sort of the campaigns that you're running aligned, and do they make sense given your organizational risk profile? Because if they're not aligned, then they're probably not getting you the value that you would be seeking in terms of how those resources are being spent. And then what does a resource look like? How do I invest appropriately in a particular program? Do I need better tooling? Do I need better training? Have I got the right people on my staff to tackle something like incident response awareness, for example? And then finally, how do I compare against my peers? It's difficult to know where I am in the pecking order. And what we'll look at in a second is data that shows that attackers are generally finding the weakest link in a market or a vertical and going after those. And they do exist, which is not so good. So here's a snapshot of security breaches. And what I want to say is that this is only data looking at companies and breaches where user data has been leaked. It doesn't include other things like theft of IP, for example, intellectual property. Indeed, this information on the screen only includes cases where over 30,000 user records or user identities were stolen. And of course, it doesn't include those which have not been made public. This is only publicly available information. So there are almost certainly numerous bubbles that have been missed from this picture. And this is only over the last 3 years. And what's notable to me here, at least, is that it isn't a specific vertical of market that's more targeted than others. If you put aside some of the biggest tech companies like the Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and in those cases, it was usually like a database had been left online accidentally. The majority of these other companies, they're not considered high-tech companies, usually. And in fact, what's interesting is that the single most common factor among them is probably their lower level of security maturity. And indeed, these findings mirror what we see as well from our incident response team and the cases that we've been running. In general, the attackers, they're not going after the hard targets. They're not sitting there and carefully planning and picking out targets to go after at the start anyway. They're far more opportunistic in the way they approach their targets. They take a vulnerability that, like the big ones we've seen recently, like the Citrix one, or the Pulse VPN one, or the F5 one. And what they do is they go out and they just find all the systems that are vulnerable on the internet using tools like Shodan, for example. And then they compromise them. And then once they've compromised all publicly, the public facing systems, then they look at the list and they say, they decide after that which ones are worthwhile continuing the attack. Which ones should they press the attack on? Because continuing the attack, that is actually a significant cost to the attacker, because many threat groups, they don't just roll in and deploy ransomware right at the start. They wait until everything is ready. They have to spend considerable amount of time and resources inside a victim's environment, understanding the victim's environment, performing things like reconnaissance to discover where things like backups are, and then working out what systems that they need to take out that are most critical for the customer. They want to make sure that this customer is going to be severely impacted, because they want to make sure that this customer is most likely to pay their ransom. And in fact, we've seen this process in many of our incident response cases take months. You know, the attacker has been in the victim for up to 90 days plus, looking at the environment and figuring out, you know, if we target these systems, then the customer is going to be most likely to pay. The other significant development that we've seen is a move to what's called a name and shame style attack or campaign. So the really good thing about ransomware from an attacker's point of view, or from an attacker's perspective, is that the attacker, once they've deployed the ransomware across the domain, as soon as the victim pays, they get the decryption key, and that decryption key is small. You know, we're talking about kilobytes worth of data. This whole exchange of keys and negotiation and all of that can be handled over something as simple as email. You know, it doesn't require heavy lifting. The attacker doesn't need to download massive amounts of data from the victim's environment and risk getting caught doing that. However, more recently, attackers have started to go after the sensitive data, and they have this information because, as I've said, they've spent months in the environment understanding the complete topology of that environment. And then what they'll do is they'll exfiltrate this data and then threaten to publish it online. In fact, if you go on the dark web, and in some cases the clear web as well, the attackers have websites that they've set up, and they're broadcasting the list of companies that they've attacked, and their data is available to download. And this is a game changer in several interesting ways. Three that I can think of anyway. The first is that the victim or the customer, they can no longer deny that they were hacked. The stolen data, that's up there on their website. Anyone can download it and see, yes, this is the real data. So they no longer can simply deny. The second is that it puts a lot more pressure on this customer to pay up, because, you know, the attackers, they're threatening to publish this data on their website. And so this makes the customer far more likely to pay the ransom, lest their data become available online on their website or on a breach forum like, say, raid forums. So now the customer, this victim, is no longer just facing the entire loss and rebuild of their own systems. They're also facing the embarrassment due to the publication of private and/or internal and/or customer data online. And the third thing, and what I think is the most insidious thing here, is that the attacker now gets to charge twice. So they get to charge not only for the keys to get their environment back up and running, those decryption keys, but they also get to charge an additional fee for having that stolen data deleted and removed. So that means that the customer now needs to pay essentially twice to get back to a known good state. So here I want to move from something general, like we've discussed here, to something concrete. And I want to take a couple of examples. This one has been in the news recently, Garmin attack, and that happened in July. And I want to take another example from a SecureWorks response that we performed on one of our customers. We won't share the names because SecureWorks takes the privacy of our customers very, very carefully, but we can share some anonymized information here. However, the Garmin attack is all publicly attributable information, so we're free to share here. So in July this year, everyone who had a Garmin smartwatch was probably aware that their smartwatches weren't syncing anymore. It happened on the 24th of July that all these synchronization services and the update services, they stopped working. And Garmin put out a notice saying that there was some problems with the back end. Later on, they came out and said, yes, they were a victim of a ransomware attack. And in this case, the ransomware attackers, they knew exactly what to go for. They knew to go for these systems that were publicly facing that would cause all of Garmin's customers to lose connectivity, to raise the profile of the attack, to make the customer more likely to pay. And in this case, we believe the customer did pay. The estimated ransomware cost was $10 million US. And this case is kind of unique because we actually know the people, the threat actor, and indeed the individual behind the attack, at least to a high level of confidence. So the attackers in this case have been attributed to a threat actor called Evil Corp. And for those of you who have a Netflix account, you're probably familiar with the TV show called Mr. Robot. And in Mr. Robot, there's a protagonist called Elliot Alderson, and he's like a vigilante hacker, and he hacks this company called Evil Corp. And in this case, there's a Russian national named Maxim who runs this organization called Evil Corp. And indeed, this is unusual because this is one of the few threat actors who have been publicly indicted by the US. I think it's the US Trade Department. And that's really interesting because it means it's legal, technically. It's breaching sanctions, in fact, if this company indeed paid the ransomware threat actor. And we believe they did. In fact, we know that they did because the decryption key for Garmin was accidentally uploaded to VirusTotal. So here's a key finding. If you are faced with ransomware and you do end up paying, don't upload the key to VirusTotal, because what's a fairly less understood secret in the cybersecurity industry is that everything uploaded to VirusTotal is in fact public. We SecureWorks have paid access into that environment, and it's a source of all sorts of wonderful telemetry for us to understand the latest tools and techniques that attackers are using. What's also interesting in this particular attack is that it's believed, and with a fairly high degree of accuracy, that the way that Garmin got around these trade sanction issues is that they paid a company, an intermediary in New Zealand, to facilitate the transaction. And I'm not a lawyer, and I don't understand how this could have worked, but somehow that was allowed them to be able to get around these trade sanctions. So, that's also a very unusual data point to be had or to be taken from this this particular attack. Another example is one that we're very familiar with because this was actually a customer of ours, and we performed the incident response. So you may be wondering, well, if they're a secure customer, how could they possibly have been affected by ransomware? And well, the reason is, in this case, the customer had only been a customer for days prior to the detection of this attack. The ink was barely dried on the contract when we started rolling out our tools, our services, and our products into this customer's environment, and immediately it lit up. In fact, they were one of the luckiest customers we've seen this year, in that we were deploying our IPS, our intrusion detection and prevention devices, just as the attackers were in their final phases of deploying ransomware. And so we detected the attack in the Australian region of this multinational organization, and we detected this malicious traffic coming from the America's part of their organization. And so we immediately went to incident response. We discovered that they were performing the final stages of this attack, and we moved to start mitigating the threat. And what's notable here is that when we're performing incident response, and when you talk to incident response professionals, they will often recommend not taking immediate action against the attacker, partly to make sure that to not tip them off yet, but partly to give us the ability to get into better position, to be able to observe and gather information. And that really helps us understand where the attacker's up to in terms of their attack, their level of sophistication, and all that information means that we are able to kick the attacker out quicker in the end, and more definitively, in that we can see wherever the attacker has been, and we can work out the shortest path or the least number of steps to fully eradicate that attacker. In this case, we didn't get that opportunity because they were in the final stages. So we had to act very quickly to contain and mitigate the damage. And of course, SecureWorks has a around-the-clock multi-region incident response team, and we worked 24/7 to contain the attacker. What's also notable here is that the attacker, they detected us working against them and thwarting their attacks, and they pivoted. In fact, they pivoted 3 different times. They changed their attack technique, they changed their toolkit to try to throw off our incident response team. But in each case, we identified the change in behavior and pivoted with them and responded appropriately. So again, this customer was particularly lucky. Just a few more days, and it is very likely that it would have been a complete loss of their environment and a complete rebuild from scratch. It's also interesting to note in this case, the client had a relatively low security maturity level. In fact, they had outsourced their entire IT security to a large integrator. They had not developed, good internal processes or plans for such an event. They had sort of assumed that the integrator would take care of that. They had not retained and trained appropriate staff with the required level of security expertise. And working with this integrator proved incredibly difficult. Even things that you would expect just in terms of general IT best practice, like an asset list, was not available, and it turns out didn't exist. So again, what we'll see as a common theme is that companies with low level of security maturity are more likely, in fact, significantly more likely to be successfully attacked than those who are not. And this is sort of borne out by the numbers that we see through our view of the world as well. So when we look at the security maturity of organizations, we often see this low level of security maturity. And in fact, 44% of companies, they lack the security strategy. They just lack it, which means that they're struggling even to define the problem, and will typically behave in a purely reactionary manner. And they'll only be responding to threats after the event. And taken as a whole, around 14% are severely lacking in security maturity compared to their risk profile, which means that in those cases they may not even be thinking about the problem at all. They may not even know they have a problem. And so this is the data the SecureWorks is seeing, and we do understand that there are difficulties that customers have in gaining the necessary situational awareness over and around their security posture. And that's really why SecureWorks have developed this security maturity model to help customers quickly get a risk profile of their security, and to be able to include things like recommendations and how your company compares with a target model, and maybe compares with your industry or market peers. So that's really what we've developed here, and what we're doing today is making that available to everyone here on this call. It's this security maturity scorecard, and it's like a benchmark report. It's in the form of an online question answer form. It's very simple to take. It should only take about 30 minutes worth of your time. It's complimentary, as in it is completely free. The recommendations are all technology and vendor agnostic, which means that we're not trying to push our own services and tools and products. What we're doing rather is making general guidance that will apply independent of whoever you eventually go with. And so this report is generated using a lot of data. So we take not just information from the teams like I work in, like the counter threat unit, not just the teams who are performing the incident response cases. We also have a variety of partners, both in Globe, but also in organizations such as ISO, NIST, CIS, Corbett, and so on. And we take all this information and map it into these 5 domains. So we've got these maturity model domains. organizational governance, security operations, cloud security, incident management, and threat intelligence. And then we map those domains across various industries, and also take into account the various inherent risks associated with various industries. And we put all that together into what's called a maturity benchmark report. And that does a few things. So it sort of grades you or puts you on a benchmark against not only your peers, but against a target model. And it also breaks it down into those 5 levels of domain. And it also gives you a sort of a broad level score on the scale from guarded through to resilient that describes where, according to this data, your organization is along this security maturity journey. So here we have an example of just part of the high-level results. In this case, the customer has a fairly low level of security maturity. They're on the guarded or the lowest level, falling well behind even that of their industry peers who are only in the informed state. We can also see here further down how that breaks down into each of the 5 level domains. And I want to zoom into this spider graph because it contains a lot of useful information in the one picture. So, go back. So here we see, the target model for across each of those domains in green, and that's kind of where you want to be or what you should be shooting for. And then we also have the industry standard, which is fairly neatly just a little bit behind that. And then this sort of pink bit in the middle or red bit defines sort of where you are according to the data provided in broken down for each of those domains. And you can sort of see here, for incident management, for example, you're actually not that far behind your industry peers. Similar with threat intelligence, but for things like the security organization, security operations, and cloud security, especially this organization is falling significantly behind. So in terms of prioritization of resources, those would be the ones to look into most urgently. Here we break down that data and dive even deeper into the various domains for your organization and score each of them on a score of 1 to 4, as well as describe general behaviors and patterns of organizations that operate at that level. And this is really useful because it helps you gauge how well you indeed fit into that category. This is what the data is saying you probably are. But if you can say, okay, so for a typical security organization and governance domain, there is no dedicated security role. There's an IT team, and security just happens to sort of be one of the various duties of that team. If that's sort of true for your organization, then it means that this rating of 1, which is low, is probably more accurate than not for your organization. So it gives you a chance to benchmark the benchmark, if you will. And then in terms of recommendations, I think this is probably the most useful for you. So here we break down again per role, per domain rather, what concrete steps you can take along the way to improve your security maturity. So these are, concrete recommendations that will be useful for your organization to take to lift, your score. So for example, cloud security, if you don't have an inventory of everything that's running in the cloud, then that would be a really, good win, nice, easy to do win that you can take, or steps you can take to improve your security maturity in the cloud security domain. And again, this is personalized for your organization based on your responses. So I want to leave with this simple key takeaway. So knowing your risk exposure is fundamental to planning an appropriate security strategy. And I believe it's safe to say that our security maturity report is one of the most simple, most cost-effective ways of getting a good picture or view into that risk exposure. And there's a link there to the right, which will allow you to take the next steps and generate your own personalized security maturity report. And there's a QR code, because I realize you can't click a link on a Zoom call like this. So yes, so I would urge you to take the report. Again, it takes very little time, and it gives you all the data and information you need to be able to take to maybe to your management, and give you the backing that you need for the type of resourcing, the domains that it should be invested in, what sort of resourcing is needed, and steps to show that you're making progress along that journey. So this concludes the presentation. I'd like to thank everyone for your attention and taking valuable time out of your day to listen to what I hope has been a valuable talk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, John, for the insightful presentation. So we saw how cyber threats are rapidly increasing in frequency, scale, and sophistication, which makes it really important for organizations to strengthen their security posture. So we'd like to take the conversation further, and we now go to our panel discussion. So for this part of the program, of course, we have Mr. John Bird of SecureWorks. Then we have Mr. Kokoy Claraval, Vice President for Product Development and Engineering of Globe Business, and Mr. Garrett Silao, Security Operations Director at Information Security and Data Privacy of Globe Telecom. To moderate this session, we have Mr. Marlon Cruz, Enterprise Solutions Sales Director, Globe Telecom. Marlon?
Yeah, thank you, Janice. Good morning, everyone. So, guys, our panelists are well represented. So we have Kokoy Claraval, who's looking after the cyber business. So we have Garrett Silao, who's managing our SOC Operations Center, and John, who is part of the CTU of SecureWorks that is doing incident response. Okay. So to kick off this panel, okay, I want to make some points that, and I really wanted to highlight some of the key messages that Peter and John mentioned during the start of the program. Okay, Peter talks about what is needed and the challenges of being a digital company. Meaning, I think he made a very good point that cybersecurity is not just a mere compliance, but it's a day-to-day warfare. Because if we try to look a few years ago, this was not the case. So technology strategy followed the business strategy. And often it was just a footnote in the business plan. But the changes dramatically happened as technology evolved as a disruptive advantage. Today, technology dictates the business strategy. It becomes a cornerstone of our business planning. So we need to start planning the cybersecurity at the same time that we are doing the business planning. John mentioned the world that is in need of protection. I can tell you that it will be far too busy for us to work it later, and trying to implement a security controls will be a nightmare once you get breached. So as a company, as a IT practitioner, as a security practitioner, we have to think already about detection, remediation, and recovery, and have those capabilities in place even before we need them. So John presented the major security breaches, and we conclude on that presentation that attacks are not a question of how, but it's a question of when. There is no such thing as 100% foolproof, but what is important for you guys is to be able to respond and to recover. So he mentioned a lot of the Garmin incident. I think let's not go too far. So last week, the first incident in the German hospital, meaning because of ransomware, there was a life loss, okay, and it's now being investigated, okay. So meaning all of us are susceptible in case of breach. Either you're a matured company or you're not so matured company, but what is important for us is to make sure that we go through that line, that we adopt more of a resilient cybersecurity maturity in order for us to be able to respond and recover. And to kick these questions, I have the first question that is being thrown in the Q&A box. Okay. 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 So I think this is for you, John. How important is it for an organization to conduct a security maturity assessment, and what will be the considerations needed when choosing a partner to do the assessment?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I believe, I mean, and again, right at the start of the presentation, you know, the fact that so many organizations, you know, that 44% number are purely responding in a reactive manner. You know, there are steps that can be taken to improve the maturity. And again, I believe that the data is showing that the higher the level of maturity, the less likely you are to be attacked. And that seems really obvious. And so to me, it seems, you know, again, very obvious that being able to take, you know, a readily available quiz, you know, like this, and get a report that you can take to your management and say, I believe, according to, you know, industry best practice and industry data, that we are lacking in maturity in this domain. And these are the resources I need to improve our score. And here's how I'll measure the level of improvement. I believe that's a really strong message that you can take to, you know, to not just your management, but also to the board, and be able to, you know, show value and, you know, reduce the chance, or, you know, increase your security maturity beyond that of your peers. And I can think of no better partner that, you know, in region than Globe to help you, you know, discuss the findings of the report. You know, maybe to help you with some of the questions in case it's not obvious, you know, some of the data that's required. So yeah, I think that it is a very low level of effort required that gives you a very high level of return on investment. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, John. I think you explained it very well. But if I may add, I think if you're looking for a partner to do your security maturity assessment, I think the key factors will really help you. Meaning, the partner should have an extensive security expertise. Meaning, they should also be implementing the latest security technologies. Meaning, you need to have an actionable security outputs and insight. Meaning they should have the capability to do proactive threat hunting, incident response. Okay, so these are some of the, I think, the qualities that you have to look as a partner when you take the journey to cybersecurity maturity. Okay, so next question, I think this is more for Kokoy. How exactly Globe can help us to improve our security posture?
Yeah, that's hey, thanks, Marlon. So there's a couple of things, diba? So first of all, the first step, what John presented today, in terms of having to do a cybersecurity risk assessment, that's number one step to determining your security posture. Globe can definitely help you in that process because we are bringing SecureWorks alongside our experience with our cybersecurity to market. So that's important. So getting the cybersecurity risk assessment done, and we do that across across our whole solution sales and account management teams, working alongside SecureWorks as we talk to our customers. So that's probably the first. Another area is when you improve your security posture, there are things that you should also be considering. For example, the number one, at least in the Philippines, educating employees is really super important. The Philippines today is still predominantly email in terms of the number one entry point for all of these security breaches. And therefore, in terms of securing employee endpoints, making sure that there is enough, the proper security to block all of this malware, and at the same time, helping employees understand, the right way in terms of managing their emails and assets. Definitely, Globe can help there. The other area is in terms of making sure that you are able to track. When you track the security metrics, when you start to improve your security posture, it is important to see if you are actually improving operationally. It is difficult to do that if you don't have a security team in place. And we all know globally there's about 4 million security jobs open. It is very difficult to build your own security team. Much so keep the people and make sure that they are constantly being developed and upskilled. Um, in Globe, our proposition to the market is making sure that we work with the best partners and also have our own set of managed security services so that we can actually assist organizations to be able to operate their cybersecurity operations excellently. I think those are maybe three areas. Definitely, maybe a fourth one. If you look at one final one, if you look at improving companies' cybersecurity posture, is always be ready with some form of with some form of incident response plan. Now, incident response plan is not, also as straightforward to prepare. Again, you need people, you need the right talent, you need the right technology in place. Part of our strategic partnership with SecureWorks is also making sure that we are able to offer to market an incident management response offering where, much like a form of insurance, where there's a set number of hours that is available for each company on an annual basis, so that in any event that the unfortunate thing happens, Globe and SecureWorks can come in and help you with with an incident management response plan. Maybe those four areas, Marlon, where we can help companies in their security posture.
Yeah, thank you, Kokoy. I think there is this question from the audience. I think I want to address this to Garrett. Garrett, as a practitioner and as the head of our Security Operations Center. Garrett, is there any specific framework that we are currently using in Globe to evaluate our maturity, and what are the key takeaways and lessons that help you achieve your current state, no? Our current state? I think Anton talks about a lot of this during the past previous years, no? So uh, can you enumerate those information, Garrett?
Actually, when we started, we also looked at the standard security models, NIST, ISO. We did all that. Then it's more of like we use those models as guidelines to improve on. We also do have our partners. We do the annual maturity assessment as well, but it's more of we attackers always adapt, and we have been threat model based in our processes, and now we adapt as well. So yeah, we keep the standards and the guidelines as a guide, but not to a T. We do some developments among the standards. For incident response and detections, we do use MITRE. Before we use the cyber kill chain as a framework, then we shifted to MITRE, as we have seen that these are more potent for us in our day-to-day work of detection and investigation. So it's more of, yeah, we do have, we just keep those standard guidelines as so that we don't get lost, but we don't keep it as a run book that we have to follow on the dot. So that's how we did it on our side.
Wow. So I think, guys, Garrett mentioned specifically, so we did not reinvent the wheel to create a framework. So we have adopted the framework, so ISO and IST, and we follow that framework. Then we moving more to a threat-based model instead of looking across all the vulnerabilities. So it's a risk-based approach. So I think that is something that Garrett has mentioned. Okay. So the next question here is, has COVID-19 changed the cybersecurity threat landscape? So what are the threat vectors we are seeing now? I think, John, if you could provide more on the global view, then Garrett, since you're managing the SOC, so more of a Philippine view. So was there really a change in the cybersecurity threat landscape because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think
John?
yes, to a certain degree. The level of activity certainly picked up, and we're not 100% sure why. I mean, it could just be that the attackers are, at home more, and there are a lot more, people who are maybe out of work and maybe looking to make a buck on the side, or they're just bored. So there's more, script kiddies around, and that adds to the background noise that you might otherwise see. And we've definitely seen a pickup in that respect, more of the low maturity attacks. But yeah, so there are a few other interesting points where that the attackers, they have, in some cases anyway, they've said, we won't go after hospitals, for example. So they're even taking pity on some of the very low, like all hospitals typically have a very low level of security maturity. And so certain attackers have said, yeah, we won't, if it is a hospital or a healthcare related provider, we will, we will provide the decryption keys for free, or we will, not attack you. So, that sort of behavior we would never have seen before, COVID-19 hit. That would have been unthinkable. So that was just one interesting insight that I've seen this year. Garrett?
Yeah, Garrett? How about on the Philippine view?
On the local front, I do agree with John. We have seen a lot of noise or script kiddie attacks that have also risen during the COVID times. Most likely because of people working, staying at home, got nothing to do, wanted to test this. More scans have been going on. I guess one of the also related with the increase of e-crime, we have seen a lot of phishing and fraudulent sites popping up, especially with some of our partners that we are also working with locally. Some of the local enterprises, banks, that there have been an increase of that. Phishing via spam has also seen a lot of those, maybe really getting from people going out of work, needing to make a buck, as John said earlier.
Okay, meaning I fully agree. No, so meaning in this new pandemic, COVID-19, there's no perimeter. So there's no more perimeter. So meaning, but I think what is key here is, meaning everybody wants to know the new COVID-19 and its impact to the threat landscape. But on my personal opinion, it's, as a practitioner, it's key to understand that the threat actors are the same, the malwares are the same, their techniques, the technology, and the procedures that they are doing are the same. What is the difference? So meaning, I can say that the wolf is just wearing a different sheep's clothing. Meaning, I fully agree with Garrett. No, on the first month of the pandemic, so we see a lot of malicious domains. As a matter of fact, I think there was a study that on the first month, 154,000 COVID-19 domain using fake SSL, meaning spam emails. So we're receiving 240 million per day spam emails related to COVID, and even FBI have recorded the spike in terms of the business email compromise during the first month of the pandemic. No? So I think that is currently what is happening when we look at the current threat landscape because of this new normal. Okay, so next one, I think this is for you, Kokoy, since you own the business for cyber. So any recommendations on how can we be better getting the buy-in of our board when it comes to cybersecurity investment? Any recommendation for that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, you have to maybe ask this question first. Do you want to pay now or tomorrow, or invest now or invest tomorrow for cybersecurity? Tomorrow will include a PR describing that you were proactive and that you have been already compromised. Isn't that obvious, right? You would rather fund cybersecurity investments today so that you avoid the damage that it might cause you and the actual repair that you need to do right after. But unfortunately, a lot of companies still decide that they would pay later rather than pay now. Maybe it's because the mindset, but this is precisely why we are in this webinar, helping organizations to realize that you better invest now rather than later, because the cost to invest later is way, way more expensive. Now, maybe just three major, if I think about it, there's probably three major things to consider when you're up for justifying a cybersecurity investment at the board level. So number one, make sure you speak the language of the board. Most of the time, cyber experts, like most in the webinar, have a habit of losing their audience or confusing them because they're very too technical and there's a lot of acronyms. If the executives do not understand that, they will be more hesitant. You need to practice this, right? The board and executives care about the business. They care about operations. So they care about mission critical operations and bottom line profits. Therefore, the way to address that is when you talk about the cyber risks and the investments that would mitigate the risks, is how can this investment avoid or minimize the threat to the goal of the company. So if it were profits, it were revenues, etc. Cyber needs to be treated as a business function. Therefore, it needs to be presented to the board as a business matter, a threat to the business goals of a company. Now, the second one is, aside from speaking their language, you have to make sure that you use the right metrics and the right visuals, right? So, typically, a cyber professional would use things like incidents detected, attacks stopped, etc. In a board, maybe save for one or two tech executives out there, the rest really don't care about that. Rather, focus on what is the business metric. For example, how much monetary loss have your controls prevented? Or how many pesos have you saved in this investment by avoiding, having to repair certain risks or leaks that happen or disruption in operations? The most important, probably, but the most difficult is if you can actually prove to the board how much more resilient have your systems become after the investment. There was a study made before that an investment that increases your resiliency by 30% is a very good way to actually help justify funding, because increasing your business resiliency by 30%, that's a lot. That is like saying, even during this COVID pandemic, that your business continued to perform and have been able to manage the risk associated that we have been describing earlier. Now, there's a lot of frameworks that we follow, like I think they were alluding to it earlier, but the NIST Cybersecurity Framework has a good model in terms of resiliency. And maybe the third one to help the board, and in Globe we also do this, is get outside verification. This means that aside from you helping justify that this is what we're trying to do, it also helps that you get somebody like a third party or somebody external to actually help communicate that too, usually in the form of some security consulting services, etc. Because an independent view also typically always helps provide that independent point of view for the board to consider. So maybe those three things. I mean, in Globe, we are very we have taken cybersecurity very, very seriously. Garrett and Anton and that whole team has really grown over the years. And I think in terms of their performance, they're actually world class. And they've really helped Globe scale to the business we're in today.
Yep. Thank you, Kokoy. Well said. I think I will just run down some of the questions that I think I can respond already. Due to COVID-19, more than 50% of most companies work at home. How can Globe help with the cybersecurity? Okay, so because 50%, 80% are working from home, so we already Globe as a valuable partner. So we're implementing people process technology in terms of addressing cybersecurity at home. So we have adopted the Zero Trust Network architecture as part of the portfolio that we're carrying. Should be able to address the Zero Trust Network architecture, the SASE architecture, the Security Access Service Edge, and on top of that is the managed security to complement these two architecture. There's another question. Is it possible to do bundling promo for security and connectivity? Yes. So we have come up already with the product of bundling our direct internet with SecureWorks services like the incident management response, meaning we also have the secured internet access, so the Zscaler bundling. So we have that product that is coming out in the next couple of weeks. So do we still have time, Janice?
Yeah, maybe we can extend for a few more minutes. We still have 363 participants online, so
I think this one is more for Garrett or John. What about the threats and risks coming from inside of the organization? Do we have solutions for this? Meaning threats that is within the organization. So how do we address this? John, Garrett?
I'll take a crack, and then Gareth, maybe you can help finish it. Yeah, insider threat is a unique challenge because the problem's pretty obvious. The people you trust to take care of your security are the ones who are acting against you, and there are all sorts of approaches to try to help detect and combat this. Solutions like DLP and user behavioral monitoring and analytics and so on, they're all great. There are drawbacks though as well, because you still need a baseline from which to operate in. And DLP is renowned for having false positives. So it is a tough problem to solve, but it is one that's worthwhile attacking because an insider threat, you don't need to look far. You can see, whistleblowers in the US government, they've done, untold amount of damage to those organizations as a result of their actions. And yeah, it's a hard one to tackle, but the tooling and the solutions that are out there are, worthwhile, investigating. And being able to tie all that information into a single pane of glass, because the information coming from those tools should be treated just the same as information coming from your AV scanner or your firewall, because it's just another source of telemetry, and it needs to be understood in context that you wouldn't otherwise get from the tool alone. So finding the right tooling and integrating the right tooling, I think, are your best response there. Gareth?
Thank you, John.
Yep. Same with us. I mean, we're working with our DLP and our, especially now that we're on work from home mode for a lot of people. We're also fine tuning our cloud broker, which is our CASB. Fine tuning of DLP, yes, it is hard. It is constant. So you need to have constant talks with the data owners to make it work properly. I guess one thing to add on what we have done with regards to internal threats as well is to make use of or have an additional view coming from our EDRs as well. You can get that from the running processes of the EDRs, the data. If you can properly correlate those things, it would also help. But I guess number one is really getting the DLP and the CASB to work.
Thanks, Garrett. I think, Garrett, since you're here, we'll take advantage of your presence. So there's this very good question coming from the audience. Okay. So they understand that Globe has completely transformed to a digital landscape. And in fact, we have been tirelessly advocating this transformation to our accounts. Okay, so they're interested to know how exactly did we begin on the transformation for digitally, and did we consider being resilient today when we talk about the landscape of security, and how do we find the right balance of transformation between cloud and security. So when we did the transformation, how did we do it? Okay, and how do we find the balance of doing the digital transformation and at the same time still being secured, or our maturity is at the resilient. So how do we find that balance?
When we started the security program in Globe, we also already got like the moving into cloud, or the cloud assets as part of our asset list. So it's not really, we see things as on-prem or on cloud. It's more of, we see these assets as, if they become live, it should be part of the security program. So regardless, if it's in cloud, it should have like the same tools or log data that are being fed into our SIM. So it should be the same. It should have like the same EDRs. Then as we move forward year on year, as technology advances, we also take into consideration, like we're moving into containers now, Docker. So those are things that we consider in our architectural plans as well, to have visibility, to have the SOC get visibility in order to see threats on those assets, and to respond accordingly. So I mean, a few years before, when we did the program, yeah, we get the visibility, but did not have the response process. It was manual because there are going to be limitations with the technology. So that's how you address it with the people and the process. So advance the people doing the detection and analysis to adapt to the limitations of the technology. So that's also part of the program. So even if we go cloud, it's all going to be the same process of, as long as we get the visibility. So that's where the technology part comes in.
Thanks, Garrett. So another question, I think, how does this work hand in hand with Globe, Zscaler, Z, and ZPA? So meaning I can answer this one. So the Zscaler, Z, and ZPA are technology solutions. So the way we're going to do it is we will ingest the logs coming from Zscaler, okay, for SecureWorks to do threat detection and response. So they will complement it with their threat intelligence coming from their platform. So it's a managed service that will be wrapped on top of the Zscaler platform. So that's how they're going to work hand in hand. I think we cover. Meaning, Garrett, there's still one question for you. How long did your security journey take?
We're at 5 years now. And we're still improving, so we don't really see ourselves as up here. We see ourselves as a continuous journey. So we're still improving for 5 years.
Okay, so
Marlon,
it's 5 years. Yep.
I see a lot of questions regarding the actual methodology for doing the assessment. So I guess to all of those asking about how do we start, what is the methodology, our account teams will work with you. So you can reach out to them, but they also are bringing this to your company. So we will discuss there and help you side by side on how to execute the cybersecurity maturity assessment model. So all of you are asking, how do we do this? So we will get in touch across our whole account teams covering you.
Okay, so there's no more questions. So Janice, I leave to you the floor to close the session.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marlon, and of course, John, Garrett, and Kokoy. Uh, if I think all questions have been answered, but in case you missed anything, we will send the answers via email. But before we let you go, guys, please don't leave yet. We have two sets of items to raffle off. Okay. So for the first item, we're giving away 10 wireless keyboards. So this one's a great addition to your work from home setup. Can you help me draw the winners? I think we're having some technical difficulties. Okay. I think maybe we can run this offline and just reach out to the winners. Is that okay? Okay. So we will just reach out to the winners. Sorry about that technical difficulty. Thank you again, everyone. We still have more than 300 guests online. So thank you again, everyone, for joining our webinar. We hope that you gain valuable takeaways that you can share with your team. And we hope that you can join us in the next episode of the Globe Business Cybersecurity web series. Please don't forget to answer the feedback form by scanning the QR code on your screen, or a link will also appear once you exit this webinar. Thank you again, and good day to everyone. And sorry again for the noise.